the alt-right. And I guess this came about as a result of Donald Trump because I had never heard the word alt-right prior to that. And so there was a mosque or a killing of 6 Muslims in a mosque in Canada, Quebec, Canada. And I have with me, he's back, we're Skyping with Theodore Shoebat, son of former Palestinian terrorist, now Christian Walid Shoebat, writer and researcher for Shoebat.com and part of the nonprofit rescuechristian.org. We're going to give you all that. Christians.org. We're going to give you all that, some more here before he leaves. He wrote a very interesting, Theodore wrote a very interesting report. And you can see that report on Shoebat.com. The man who murdered 6 people in a mosque in Quebec has been identified as an alt-right white nationalist. Amazing. Theodore, welcome back, sir.
It's good to be on, Jesse. It's been a while. Happy New Year to you.
I know. Where have you been?
I'm asking you that. I haven't heard from you in a while.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. How's your father?
Doing very well. Always busy. Always busy. Man. Working on the website every single day.
Amazing. There's always something going on.
Always.
Did you vote for Donald Trump?
Yeah. We supported Donald Trump, and we wrote articles on Shoebat.com in support of him. But also, when it comes to presidents or any politician, we always try to have a balanced view.
Okay.
So, like, ever since you had George Bush, I remember. Well, I wasn't doing any website work. We weren't doing any website work when George Bush was president. At least not in his during his first term. But when Bush was president, we all thought the Iraq War was great, and now we realize it was a mistake. So when it comes to presidents, I've learned not to get excited over that.
Right.
He's a president. Let's see what he does, and if he does something good, then we acknowledge it. If he does something bad, then we acknowledge it as well. So
what made you vote for Trump, Donald Trump?
What's that?
Trump? What made you vote for President
Well,
Trump?
it was the alternative to Hillary Clinton. That was my view of it the whole time. Before Donald Trump won, I predicted that he was going to win several times. And I said, this guy is going to win. And people said, well, how do you know that? I said, go on the internet. Go on Facebook. Go on Twitter. You see the hysteria. Like, people love this guy.
Yeah.
And but one thing that I criticized Trump on was his foreign policy, because and this is before he even won. I said, if Trump wins, and I believe he is, he's going to have something of an isolationist view of foreign policy, and that's what you're seeing already. And I made that prediction. I said you're going to see it. He's going to be angering these other countries, angering countries like Japan. And he said it himself. He said, if Japan wants to use nuclear weapons on North Korea, then so be it. And that was my criticism of him, because I don't think that we should be allowing Japan to be using nuclear weapons, given their history of imperialism and genocide and tyranny during the Second World War and before that. So that was my criticism of him.
How are you feeling about him now, with the things he's already done?
I think he's done some good things. Like, for example, he signed the Mexico City policy, which bans people from coming into the United States to promote abortion.
Yeah.
My criticism of him so far is, I believe that, well, I don't like how he is so indifferent towards the European Union. He's like, well, let it all burn. He has this let it all burn down kind of mentality. And the EU has its problems. The EU is corrupt, but we can't forget why the EU was formed. The European Union was formed after the Second World War for the purpose of containing German nationalism. And so if the EU goes down, then what you will have inevitably is ultranationalism. And if you have ultranationalism, then we're going back to the 20th century. And that's what's worrying. But we'll see. It's only been a few weeks, so we'll see what happens.
What
We'll see what happens.
you say you voted for him because of the alternative being Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Were there anyone else that you preferred
I
or
like
liked campaign?
I liked Bobby Jindal.
Oh,
I just found it fascinating that an Indian man becomes the governor of Louisiana. But to be honest with you, my view of the position of the president is something different from the general view. My view is this: that in the United States, presidents change, but policy really doesn't change. Specifically, foreign policy, like in the late '80s. In the late '80s, early '90s, the United States was already talking about removing Saddam Hussein, removing Gaddafi, and all these things. And that was when Bill Clinton was president. Well, George Bush, we had a Republican, and the policy was being carried out. They got rid of Saddam Hussein. Then Obama became president, and liberals thought, oh, he's not going to be a war guy like Bush, and he ended up being a war guy. Right? I mean, we saw Gaddafi go down. We saw Mubarak go down. We saw Syria get just decimated. We saw all sorts of drone attacks being conducted under Obama. So foreign policy is not going to change all that much. And that's my view. So I try not to get overexcited about the position of the president, because in the United States, we have different branches of power. It's not just the president, right? We have the Congress, we got the House of Representatives as well. And we also have the CIA and all sorts of other people who are in power who are also calling the shots. I'll tell you one thing, though, about Trump that does make me think and concerns me is this sort of undue influence coming from people like Steve Bannon. And I know maybe you like Steve Bannon because I know you've written for Breitbart. And I mean, I keep track of your work, Jesse, believe it or not, I do. I watch your videos all the time on YouTube. I think I've watched all your videos on your YouTube channel. But I'm concerned about this sort of undue influence from people like Steve Bannon, because Steve Bannon, I mean, he ran Breitbart, and Breitbart became the propaganda machine for the alt-right, right? So because you started talking about the alt-right, the subject of this interview is supposed to be the alt-right, so let's get to it.
I want to ask just one quick question.
Yeah.
What did I want to ask you? I forgot. It left my mind.
Well,
let's go to the alt-right. First, I want to know, what is the alt-right? Define that for
very good question.
For us. And what is that?
That's a good question. The alt-right, in my view, from me studying it, from my own observation, is really a attempt to revive the 20th century style progressivism under the guise of being called conservative or right-wing. So if you study Margaret Sanger, right? Let's talk about Margaret Sanger, because she's a woman that you and I know very well, I think.
Yes.
Margaret Sanger was part of this progressive idea that the United States needs to be a white country. They're what they call themselves. So they call themselves race realists. So they want to keep it. They have this idea of creating this monolithic society. And so if you read about Margaret Sanger and also the eugenist movement of the United States that was ran by people like Laughlin and Madison Grant and other people like that, they all supported this bill called the Immigration Act of 1924. And during the Second World War, you had a ship coming to the United States full of Jewish people who were escaping genocide during the Holocaust. And the eugenist movement of the United States, over which Margaret Sanger was very influential,
right,
they said, we can't have them here because they're going to ruin the white identity of the United States. So they sent the ship back. But they used the Immigration Act of 1924. Now let's look at some of the head ideologues of the alt-right of our time. You look at Richard Spencer. You look at American Renaissance, that's headed by Jared Taylor. You look at Numbers USA, which is a big They call themselves Immigration Reduction Organization, ran by people like Roy Beck and John Tanton. They all want to reinstate and reenact the Immigration Act of 1924, the same bill that was used to justify preventing these Jewish refugees from coming into the United States. That's what's very worrying. And if you look at, I know
I think when you're making a mistake is in any movement, you're going to have extremes. And so Margaret Sanger was an example of an extreme. But people like Steve and Roy Beck and others, they are not extreme like that.
I'll address that after the commercial break.
Yeah, they want the country to function.
I'll address that.
Okay,
but I'll address that after the commercial break.
888-775-3773. Back in a moment. I am Skyping with Theodore Shoebat. Is it Shoebat or Shoebat?
Shoebat, actually. Shoebat. The website is shoebat.com. shoebat.com. Just letting the audience know.
We're talking about alt-right. I know Roy Beck of Numbers USA.
Right.
And I also know Steve Bannon of Breitbart.
Right.
And I've been working with those guys for a while now.
But yeah,
and they wouldn't. They are not extreme alt-right people. They just America. They are what I would call nationalists, where they put the country first. Is there anything wrong with that? Putting your country first?
No, I mean, if you look at, like, I'm a Catholic, right? And if you look at Catholic doctrine, there is a distinction that is made in Catholic doctrine between patriotism and nationalism. And so patriotism is when you respect your country, you appreciate what your country has done for you, what your government has done for you, and you also do things that benefit the society because you want to give back to the country that has allowed you to live in it and thrive in it. Right. But then you have nationalism, which says that the race is above God. The race is above the church. The race is above the body of Christ.
But that's not what you guys.
But Jesse, let me just. I want to resume where I left off before the commercial break. If you study, and I'm really urging you to do this. I'm just out of concern. If you study the history of Numbers USA, go look at the reports that were made on who they have supported in the past. Numbers USA has supported Planned Parenthood, zero population growth. In fact, they have funded Planned Parenthood. I'm dead serious. Roy Beck founded Numbers USA with John Tanton. John Tanton is an extreme supporter of Planned Parenthood, has not only funded Planned Parenthood, but has helped build Planned Parenthood facilities where abortions are made, where abortions are done, where murder is done. And also, if you look at... we may disagree with them on their moral issues, some more. This is a very strong moral issue, Jesse. I think that you and I both know that. If you look at
country though.
But if you look at, for example, like, I know you've had Mike Cernovich on your show several times, and he did an article entitled "Is Mike Cernovich part of the alt-right?" And I think he emphatically says, "No, I'm not part of the alt-right." But in this article, he talks about the authorities of the alt-right. And he says, if you want to know what the alt-right is, simply look. And he names them. Jared Taylor, Richard Spencer. Go look at them to see what the alt-right is. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go look at them. So I started I knew who these guys were before, but I'm going to tell you who these people are. I'm sure you have an idea of who they are. Jared Taylor also supports Planned Parenthood. Not only does Jared Taylor support Planned Parenthood, he loves Margaret Sanger. Again, going back to the 20th century progressivism. Loves Margaret Sanger and supports something. He supports eugenist policies being conducted in the United States to create a white society. And this should be an insult to both you and me. And I'll read you a quote from Jared Taylor. He says, "The crazy..."
Let
but
me ask, Theodore, did Jared say he supported eugenics in
yes,
order to create a white society?
yes, yes, 100%. Let me read you a quote, a direct quote from him. He says, "The crazy suicidal myths that's pervading today is that somehow anyone can come to the West and become a son or daughter of Western civilization. That's absolutely impossible. No people, not biologically born to a civilization, can carry it forward in a meaningful way." In other words, if you're not born biologically into civilization, and what he means by that is not something that's cultural. He's speaking of demographics, DNA. He's speaking of the white race here. He's saying that you can't move the society forward. In other words, if you're of African origin, you're not going to help the society. Only the whites can help society. In this same statement...
Let me say, hold on. What I would have to do, Theodore, is have Jared on to discuss you or debate you on this issue, because when I talked to him or read his writing, it sounds more like he is saying it's a matter of the heart.
No. I'm telling you, Jesse, go look at the interview that he did. In fact, I have the video right in front of me in which he said this. It's called "Survival of Western Civilization, Immigration, and Eugenics." And I'm looking at the video right now, in fact. And I can send it to you. And I can send it to you.
Some other things, but I have him back on. Would you debate him?
Sure.
Okay.
I debate anyone, Jesse. Come on, you know me. But listen. But listen, let me just finish this. Go watch the interview that he did with Gavin McInnes. He did a debate, actually, on the Gavin McInnes show on Rebel Media. And he said that if anybody wants to get an abortion, go right ahead. That he thought that Margaret Sanger was a great lady. This is a revival. They're bringing back an old demon from the dead. That's what this is. An old demon that was buried after the Second World War, and they're trying to bring it back. And if you look at Breitbart.com,
right, I don't want to waste a lot of time on that, because
I think I kind of do, because it's on the subject matter. It's on the alt-right.
I know, but I'd rather have them defend themselves, and I will set it up. So
bring it on, yeah.
But let me ask, so is it because they support, according to you, they support abortion, that and maybe other things that you might not agree with morally, that you believe that they are this alt-right who are just for white people? Is it because of the moral aspect of it?
It's a mixture of things, Jesse. It's abortion. It's also the outright support for eugenics. So, for example, you have John Derbyshire, who's pretty well known in the alt-right circles. He's all for embryonic selection. Jared Taylor has also openly supported the policy of embryonic selection, the idea we can choose the embryo, the best baby based on the genes. I mean, it's so diabolical and evil. And also, if you look at Breitbart, there is an article written by Milo Yiannopoulos on what is the alt-right, defining the alt-right. And he says something that's also very disturbing. He says, but again, it's revealing. He says, the origins of the alt-right can be found in thinkers as diverse as Oswald Spengler and Julius Evola. Who are these writers? Julius Evola was a idea and advanced this idea called spiritual racism. And also, Oswald Spengler believed in this apocalyptic war between the white man and the black and the yellow races. These people would eventually influence the Nazis and also people like Mussolini.
Amazing. Let me ask you, how would you...
It's very dangerous.
Where would you put the men and women, I guess? Can women be alt-right as well?
Some of the most vicious people within neo-Nazi gangs are women, so yeah.
So where do you put the men and women of the quote-unquote alt-right who are not for abortion and who are not for eugenics and all that, but they are for shutting down the borders, putting a wall around the borders,
Yeah.
preventing illegal aliens from coming here.
Well, I'll answer the question after the commercial break.
Cutting back, preventing radical Islamics from coming here.
I'll answer the question after the commercial break.
Right, because they're nationalists who are for America. I want to know, are you okay with them? Right after this break.
Okay.
888-77 Jesse. We will get to some. All right, welcome back. I'm Jesse Lee Peterson, taking your phone calls at 888-7753-773, 888-77 Jesse. Talking about the alt-right with my friend Theodore Shoebat. He is back, and he's the son of former Palestinian terrorist, now Christian, Walid Shoebat. I've had him on several times. And Theodore is a writer and researcher for Shabbat.com and part of the nonprofit RescueChristians.org. How is that going, Theodore? RescueChristians.org.
It's going pretty well. We had that horrific bombing in Egypt not too long ago. We ended up helping some people who were injured in that bombing. Pretty severely injured in that bombing. We continue to do charity work in Pakistan and all that, so it's going pretty well.
And so you take donations from people to help get this work done, right?
Absolutely. And if anybody wants to donate to help persecuted Christians, just go to rescuechristians.org. That is rescuechristians.org, and you'll see it. And it's something that's needed because under Barack Obama for the last 8 years, the Christians were the last ones he was trying to rescue. And so a lot of Christians are being persecuted over those areas. Yes, it was pretty horrific. Horrific, especially in Nigeria, in Egypt, in Iraq. Although the U.S. government did do some things to help persecuted Christians, of course, it's never enough. So,
right. I want to go back to the alt-right. You mentioned, Roy Beck and Steve Bannon and others. I remember somewhat when Martin Luther King Jr. started his movement, and he was for black improvement, but in a non-violent way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was good. He was about building character.
Right.
Fun.
But
there were people who got in the movement on the back burner, and people like Malcolm X at the time, the Nation of Islam and others. And those people, the Black Panthers, those people were extreme, about killing. They were about one race. They were about all the crap. And so it made Martin Luther King movement look dirty as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you might be mixing here, some extreme, even though I don't see Steve Bannon or Roy Beck as an extreme alt-right person. I interviewed Vox Day. Do you know who he is?
Yes, I'm very familiar with Vox Day. They're a eugenist magazine.
And he has described himself as an alt-right.
Yeah, but they're a eugenist magazine as well. And they promote...
And a Christian nationalist.
Yeah, but...
And so what do you say to him?
Oh, you're talking about... I'm sorry, I was confused with V there. My mistake. Vox Day.
Yeah. Are you familiar with him?
A little bit, yeah. I haven't done too much research on him, though. I should do more research on him, I guess. But Vox Day, Christian nationalist, is... I don't know. I haven't done that much research on him to make an adequate comment, to be honest with you.
Came to be an alt-right and a Christian nationalist.
Is that a question?
Is that a good thing?
No, I don't think so. We have to, like I said earlier in the show, we have to differentiate between nationalism and patriotism. And then this is actually a distinction that was well defined by Dietrich von Hildebrand, the great Christian scholar. Like I said earlier, patriotism is appreciating your society and doing good for it, being proud of the nation and the culture. Nationalism is when you put the race above the body of Christ. And I did a little bit of reading on Vox Day, and he is, from what I have read, he is racial centric. And see, this is the problem. Like, we bashed Black Lives Matter, BLM, for being ethnocentric, which is what Jared Taylor is and all that. But we're not really going full on the quote unquote right organizations that are also ethnocentric. Like when we had a shooting in Dallas and 7 cops died, I was doing videos on it, numerous videos on it, in fact. And I talked about this ethnocentric ideology of the murderer. And so we have to also attack this sort of ethnocentrism, which is also extremely dangerous. And if you
Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group, in my opinion. They're very radical,
but you see,
and violent, and these people are not violent.
but you see, it always begins with people talking. Evil actions always begins with evil ideas. So, for example, why is the alt-right movement trying to revive the writings of Oswald Spengler, who talked about an apocalyptic war between blacks and whites and yellow people? In fact, I can read to you the quote. Why is Milo Yiannopoulos, why is the alt-right promoting homosexual supremacy? That's another question. Let's look at Breitbart. Several times they have published articles written by Milo Yiannopoulos in which he says, and I can send them to you, Jesse, in which he emphatically says that homosexuals inherit genetically a high IQ. What is up with this obsession with IQ? No, it's sickening. This is exactly the kind of crap that was taught by Nazi ideologues.
I know you're right, but Milo is a homosexual, so he's out.
But come on, Jesse. I remember the days.
But let me ask you this,
Jesse. I remember the days when you were on the Young Turks and you were like, you take it from behind. Come on, you know that ain't normal. And now it's like, now we got Milo Yiannopoulos. I mean, give me a break.
Well,
it's sickening.
It's normal, but what I'm saying to you is that in any movement, and some movements start out good, you're going to always find the corrupt who infiltrate themselves, as they did with the civil rights movement. You had the radical homosexuals coming in.
But this is in Breitbart, my friend. This is in Steve Bannon's team. This is right there in the circle. He's high up there, prestigious position in Breitbart. I mean, it's really, really dangerous.
And here, ask this: is there such a thing as being an alt-right nationalist? Can that be a good thing?
No. Now, someone, it's like saying, is it a good thing to be a Muslim? No. Is every Muslim a terrorist? No. But we have to look at the head ideologues and who's promoting this to actually define it adequately, not what the average person or what the lay person is saying.
Let me do this. When I come back, we'll take some calls.
Sure.
Right after this break, folks. Just for funny says, get a job. That's just the way it is. People can change, they always do. Haven't they noticed the changes in you? Or can it be that like love I'm blind? You are wanting so much till it's all in my mind. One thing I know for sure is really real. So Theodore, I want to squeeze in some calls here. We're right out of time. 888-7753-773. Um, I believe in God, country. I believe in putting my country first. I want a big, beautiful wall around the borders. I want to stop illegals from coming in. I want to prevent the radical Islamic terrorists from coming in and have proper front door entrance enter. Um, I put my country first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, second to God, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Am I alt-right?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you're saying what conservatives have been saying for decades. So
Can
not necessarily bad. The problem is not to be proud of one's culture, to believe in putting borders and the belief in borders. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I would, in fact, I would support you on that. My issue is when they use these things as a front to cover up a sinister agenda of race, sinister agenda of racialism. Once you start getting into DNA, it's like the French have a very distinct culture, right? The Spanish have every country has its own little distinct culture. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. Once you start getting into DNA, that's when you cross a line.
do you think that President Trump is an alt-right?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I've heard him say some things about his DNA, like how he has, good genes for intelligence and all that, which is what the eugenist doctrine teaches. Is he going to start putting people in concentration camps? I don't think so.
So do you think he would support an alt-right or a group that is hateful toward another group? Like, believe in eugenics.
Sure.
You think the president would support that?
To answer that question, look at Steve Bannon. I mean, Steve Bannon is going into Europe to create a German and a French branch for Breitbart.com, specifically to support parties like the National Front and the Alternative Party for Deutschland. And these parties are getting up in popularity, right? And these parties are helping to disintegrate the European Union and things like that. What would worry me about Trump, I don't think he's going to be like Heil Hitler. I mean, he denounced Richard Spencer when he said Hail Trump and all that, and that's a good thing. What would worry me is kind of like what Obama did with the Muslim Brotherhood. And he says, well, I think it's a great thing that this party is getting up there, and it's a great thing that the EU is being disintegrated and being replaced by these ultra-nationalist groups. That's what worries me. Is he going to do it? It's a 50-50. I don't know.
Let's go to the Bible Go-To God of Los Angeles. Bible Go-To God, thanks for calling. You're on with Theodore Shoebat.
Yes, thank you, Jesse. Good morning, Theodore.
Good morning.
God commanded even to the Jews, he told them, don't intermarry, and that's throughout the Old Testament. Don't intermarry with these other people. They're corrupt. And yet they did allow other nations, other peoples to, willingly join the Jews and the Jewish religion in their nation. So what's the balance there?
It has nothing. I've heard this argument before. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with religion. Because let's not forget that Joseph was a holy man and he married a Canaanite woman. Let's not forget that Moses married a Cushite woman. And let's not forget that you have Uriah the Hittite marrying a Hebrew woman, Bathsheba. And she wasn't too faithful. He was better than her. So I think that when you read the verse in the Bible, don't intermix with these people. As soon as it says don't intermix with these people, the white nationalist types, the alt-right types, they stop there. But no, let's read the whole thing. It talks about how they're idolaters and they're into evil practices and things like that. It's about action, not DNA. That's the bottom line. We're all the sons of Noah.
Yes, that's true. But there were a division even back then. It started that the lighter skinned races managed to make a civilization, and the darker skinned races made a darker civilization, so to speak. And
what do you mean by darker? Like what? Like evil? Now let me explain something to you. Let me explain something to you. Let me explain something to you.
No, let him finish the point. Hold on. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah.
Even today you can see that Africa is a wasteland of darkness. China is under communism. The Middle East is like all the dark races seem to be like they can't get it together. And the black people had it together in this country for a while, but then they fell to the hatred and they lost it. But they could have been a light to the rest of the races. But, the rest of the races, if you look around the world, the only peoples coming in to any country and mixing with the races and calling the people who don't want that to happen races is the dark races moving into Europe and the dark races moving into, America and Canada. And it is right for people to say, the numbers here, they don't figure, You let too many of them in and they tend to, fall back to their own, dark ways and stuff.
Are you done with your blue pill mentality? Can I respond?
Go ahead, Theodore.
Okay, thank you. This is what I call blue pill mentality. They love to point at what people have said about particular people, and they don't ever ask why they are bringing this up and what is the evil agenda behind it. First, he brings up the Bible, and he says, well, the Bible is against race mixing, and I just refuted that within no time, showing scripture. Another thing, let's look at, but then he moves off into the tip. Please, shut up. Shut your mouth. All right? Because the last time I went on this show, you brought up your little Unitarian Islamic religion, and I beat you one on that, so I'm going to respond to you on this one.
Oh, you remember him?
Of course I remember him. But now we're in the commercial break.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, folks, final segment with my guest, Theodore Shoebat. Visit their website. They have two. Shoebat, that's SHOEBAT.com. And then their nonprofit, RescueChristians.org. They support it. They need your finance. They really help rescue. They're doing great work with helping the Christians. We have a couple minutes left, Theodore.
Let me just respond to the little Nazi that was talking before the commercial break. Now, he talked about how the white people are better and the dark-skinned people, which is just a straight-up eugenist Nazi way of talking. But let me just answer it real quick. Let me just answer it. The reason why Europe became a civilization is not because of DNA. Europe became a civilization because of Christianity. Now, you would expect the Bible go-to man to know that, but he doesn't. Before Christianity enlightened the European peoples, let's read about what the European peoples were doing. Human sacrifice, burning people alive, sticking people in wicker mans, as is witnessed by Julius Caesar. St. Irenaeus of Lyon talks about how the French natives went into ecstasy as they watched people being burned alive, skinned alive, fed to wild animals. This was the whiter skin. Now let's talk about an African race that most people don't know and don't care about. Let's talk about the Nama people. The Nama people were an African Christian group of people who were not bothering anyone, who were living in Nambia. And during the First World War, and I think before that, the German white people invaded their country, took the Namas, decapitated them, to scientifically examine them. Not only did they decapitate them to observe their skulls, they also cut off their private parts and sent them back to Germany so that they can be compared. Please, shut your mouth. I let you finish. So that they can be compared scientifically and all these things. So this was a white race. And hold on. Let me finish. You have 2 world wars started by whites, and over 100 million people dead.
30 seconds.
Over 100 million people dead.
Baba, go ahead. Real fast.
Yeah.
Let's hear the little Nazi talk. Go ahead.
Lots of instances of white or
Bible, how about you and me debate on the Trinity? Since you're such a little Unitarian, you're no different than a Muslim swine pig. How about you and I debate on this next show?
We'll have you back. Thank you so much.
All right, man.
Okay.
This has been the Jesse Lee Peterson Show, produced by Bond, Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. Views expressed by guests and callers on today's program may not necessarily represent the views of the station. For more information, call 1-800-411-BOND. That's 1-800-411-BOND. Or
Thank you,
visit our
Theodore.
website.
We'll bring on you and Jared.